Good evening, everybody. It's your friend Sean here, sitting on the workbench, relaxing after a day of work, a nice bike ride in the sunshine. I just had a few thoughts about this wonderful article I read on Epsilon Theory by a gentleman named Ben Hunt. Now, this article is called The Ministry of Rights and the Compassionate Man. I'll put a link in the description for you. Please give it a read. If you haven't read it already, it's well worth your time. And I've been sort of poring over it, thinking over it. And the article is talking about essentially this big news story that's just been breaking recently. You have to be living under a rock not to have heard of it or followed it. It's this college admission scandal that's going down in the States with like Lori Loughlin's kid and all these other famous people. And so Hunt in his article really lays it out there in no uncertain terms. These parents, want what's best for their children, or are willing to do more or less anything to get it. And what is that they want to get? What is the value there? It is getting your passport stamped, so to speak, that's Ben Hunt's phrase, at these prestigious institutions, such as, I believe Yale was caught up in it, USC, was it USC, UCLA, Berkeley? Because that's the entry into a life of success. I mean, think of Silicon Valley and the hard thing about hard things. Mr. Horowitz lays out that you having an Ivy League degree is basically the passport into that hallowed world. You need that, and people know that, and they're willing to bribe, cheat, steal to get their kids into those places. So we can all appreciate that instinct in terms of you want what's best for your children, your family. I think that it is a little short-sighted to break the rules, but I do live in Canada. It's slightly different here. We don't really have the prestige institution mindset to the same extent that they do have it in the States, frankly. We still have it, but it's not the same game. I don't think anyone's bribing to get their kids even into U of T. I could be wrong, but it's just a very different game. And there are Canadians caught up in this, but they're getting their kids into American schools. Anyways, I digress. One of the funny things I was thinking about when I was reading this article is I was sort of looking around the world, and I was seeing, Brexit. The Brexit votes are collapsing and recoalescing, and the speakers getting in the way, and God knows what is going on with the EU. The election of Donald Trump, where this guy came kind of out of the weeds, because he'd never been a politician before. And it's fairly standard that presidents are politicians at some level nowadays. Came out of the woodwork. Huge surprise victory. I've talked about it a lot on this. Brexit, again, huge surprise. Remember the night of the Brexit result, the picture of Boris Johnson going home on the tube, all slumped over because he thought he lost. Surprise! And we are seeing this sort of populist movement worldwide. It just sort of clicked into me on that article. Isn't there sort of almost a connection in something that's going on here, where you see that people in the world who vote for Brexit, vote for Trump, don't really give a shit about the credential anymore. And part of Mr. Hunt's article talks about, yes, you still need to get that passport stamp, and I do agree. But another part of me was thinking, when does that change? Because that does change. He talks about a Chinese institution that was around for 1,000 years that was similar to in the prestige department in a way that this sort of racket is run to our modern, say, Ivy League universities. But what happened to that? That's one thing that the article doesn't quite get into. That old Chinese bureaucracy was totally destroyed. The Communist Revolution destroyed all of that. Remember, in the Cultural Revolution, there could be problems not just for the people who were right at the top of the heap, not just for the Justin Trudeaus or the those elites of that nature whose parents were presidents, the Hillary Clintons of the world, went to God knows where did she go, Yale, Oxford, NYU, all the her passport's been stamped many times by the most prestigious universities. Remember, in the Cultural Revolution, people did not really care about what bureaucratic school you went to. In fact, that could have been used against you because they were hunting down landowners, they were hunting down, I'm sure, members of the royal family, of course. They were even hunting down teachers who were part of that system. So when I look at Brexit and I look at the rise of Trump, I see, is this system changing? This system that sort of credentialed these people to go into a world where they ran countries from London, from Washington, D.C., from Silicon Valley in its own way, from Ottawa. But the sort of that sort of worldview, the acceptable thing to think in Washington, D.C., just got tossed out the window. The acceptable thing to think if you're a Guardian reader who works downtown London just got tossed out the window. The acceptable thing to think if you're on Bay Street, Liberal Party guy, is going to get tossed out the window. That's my fundamental belief, sooner or later. So, I fundamentally think that, yes, it is true that at this moment, it does pay to stamp your passport, but I think that it pays less now than it did, even though it's more competitive. And I think that that's, if it hasn't fully changed already, it's going to soon. Nothing lasts forever. And I think that in some ways these cycles of history get spun up even faster when the fact that technology is changing faster, globalization is changing things faster. And, we don't have 1,000 years of sitting there with the same plow technology. And that's what allows your lord's family to be the same bloodline, the king's family to stay the same bloodline, and the serfs or the peasants to, essentially stay at the same level, the same bloodline. I think that's all changing now. And I think that the value of these things is getting less and less as we see that there's less and less there. And we look at these institutions and we say, there's less and less there. I look at the Canadian institutions. Trudeau, there's nothing there. Morneau, there's nothing there. Yeah, they went to the right schools and they had the right connections all the way along. But they're not capable people. We understand that now. People in Canada are aware of that. And, I hope that we don't have a cultural revolution because I don't like the violent side of things, but in the same breath, I think that there's the potential for great freedom here, where people say, hey, you're more than just your passport stamp. Okay? You are you. Let's take a look at you, who you are. What can you do? What do you bring to the table? What are you made of? And it's more than just the degrees on the wall. So I'd like to leave you with that thought. I'll keep thinking about this some more. You reach out to me, drop me a line in the comments if you please, and I thank you for watching. Have a great night.